Thank you, gentlemen, for pointing us home. Last year, I told you all that I was confident that a man that fought this hard to get this job would now fight hard, just as hard, to enable NASA to do its job: science, exploration, education, pushing the frontiers of human intellect into space. Does the NASA administrator need much further introduction? I would like to give the floor to Jim Bridenstine to give us NASA's plan for the future. I, for one, hope, and I think I'm already validated in that Mars as ultimate goal of human exploration still features very prominently in it. Mr. Bridenstine, we are all ears.
Want to make sure this microphone is working. Can all of you hear me? Yes. Fantastic. Well, thank you for being here at the Human to Mars Summit. I just want to say to start what an impressive group Explore Mars is. I know it from being a member of the House of Representatives. I had time there serving on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. I served on the Space Subcommittee, and I got to know Chris Carberry very well. And because of his leadership and all of your support, the representation for activism, humans going to Mars, is very strong. So it is great to be here, and it's always an honor. A couple of things that I think are important to note, and some of it has already been addressed, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's important for us to keep these things in mind. Because of recent missions, people in this room are very familiar with Spirit and Opportunity. We now know a few very critical pieces of information. We know that the northern hemisphere of Mars was at one point covered with two-thirds of it was covered with ocean. That's an amazing discovery. We also know that Mars had a strong magnetosphere that protected it from the radiation of deep space and solar radiation. We also know that Mars had a thick atmosphere. And of course, even today, because of our Mars missions, we're learning more and more about that atmosphere. Because of orbiters right now that are looking straight down at the surface of Mars, we're making assessments as to the amount of water vapor and semi-heavy water that is in the atmosphere of Mars, and how it changes with dust storms and heavy winds and those kind of activities. And in fact, we're seeing, no kidding, ice clouds in the upper atmosphere of Mars during times of low dust storms, and when dust storms kick up, those ice clouds go away. We are learning so much about the atmosphere of Mars, even as we speak. Just in the last year, since I became the NASA administrator, a number of other amazing and critical discoveries have been made. The idea that there are complex organic compounds on the surface of Mars is something that it's going to be transformational as we go forward. Those complex organic compounds do not exist on the moon. They exist on Mars. And of course, they're all over Earth. And I am not suggesting that there is life on Mars. I don't know, but we should find out. I will also tell you that we now know that the methane cycles of Mars, and again, this is discovered in the last year, are perfectly commensurate with the seasons of Mars. Methane cycles are correlated with life. I am not saying there's life on Mars. It could be geology. We don't know. But again, we ought to find out. We also now know that there's liquid water, which I heard you talk about just a few minutes ago. There's liquid water under the surface of Mars, 12 kilometers under the surface of Mars, where that water is protected from the radiation of deep space and solar radiation. What do we know about water on Earth? Everywhere there is liquid water on Earth, there is life. And now we know that there is liquid water on Mars. Again, I am not saying that life is there. All I'm saying is we need to find out. So a lot of people are familiar with how hard we're pressing right now to go to the moon. I'm going to tell you why. It's written in the President's Space Policy Directive 1. We're going to the moon because we want to get to Mars with humans. If we want to learn more than we've ever learned before about Mars, we need to get there with humans. So Space Policy Directive 1 says we're going to go to the moon. It says we're going to go sustainably. We're going to go with commercial partners and international partners. Here's the key component, and this is a brand new policy in the United States of America. We are going to utilize the resources of the moon. Why are we so interested in utilizing the resources of the moon? Well, friends, because when we send humans to Mars, which is our goal, we have to be able to live and work on another world for long periods of time using the resources of that world, in other words, Mars. The best way to prove those capabilities and prove those technologies is to do it at the moon, where it is part of the Earth-Moon system. The moon is always with the Earth. It is a 3-day journey home. And we know what happens when bad things happen on the way to the moon. We've seen it with Apollo 13. Our astronauts can make it home safely. The challenge with Mars, as everybody in this room is familiar, Mars and Earth are lined up on the same side of the sun once every 26 months, which means we have to be prepared to go and to stay, to utilize the resources of Mars. And of course, the prime resource is the water ice. And now we know that there's liquid water on Mars. So how do we do that? We need to prove it out at the moon. The moon is the proving ground for our eventual missions to Mars. So we're going to utilize the resources of the moon. And if you read the entirety of Space Policy Directive 1, it is to enable an eventual mission with humans to Mars. The moon is our path to get to Mars in the fastest, safest way possible. That's why we go to the moon. It is about keeping our eyes, and that's why this group is so important. We need to make sure our nation keeps its eyes on the horizon goal, which is sending humans to Mars. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to show a brief video about our effort to get to the moon sustainably. I'll talk about it afterwards, but if we could, I'm going to walk over here to this podium so I don't fall off the stage. We're going to dim the lights, and we're going to watch this video. If you would just give it about 3 minutes here.
Ignition sequence start. All engines up.
We have taken tremendous steps.
We choose to go to the moon before this decade is out.
We have achieved the earth-shaking, the breathtaking, the groundbreaking, and left a mark in the heavens. Our successes build one upon another and amplify what is possible.
The dawn of Orion.
It's time we take the next great leap. We're building the next chapter of American exploration, returning to the moon to stay, so we can go beyond to Mars, to expand what's possible and further our understanding. The architecture for these missions is already taking shape. We will go with new systems, bold designs, and a sustainable mission. You can hear it, taste it, touch it. We are going. We are training, testing, pressing our pioneering spirit into every component, defining our resolve with every line of code, and securing our success with every welcomed partnership. This is not hypothetical. This is not about flags and footprints. This is about sustainable science and feeding forward the advance of the human spirit. Because we are the pioneers, the star sailors, the thinkers, the visionaries, the doers. And because we stand on the shoulders of giants to go farther than humanity has ever been, we will add our names to the rolls of the greatest adventurers in history. Every day, every mission, we advance this calling. We are NASA. And after 60 years, we're just getting started.
So a couple of things that I think are important to note. When we go to the moon, as the video said, we are in fact going to stay. We want a sustainable presence on the surface of the moon. That means we need Gateway. We need to build reusability into the system. The Gateway is a reusable command and service module. It enables sustainability. It's how our astronauts can interact with other astronauts on the surface of the moon, but it's also how we do command and control of robotic activities and landers and rovers on the surface of the moon. Again, the idea is we can have multiple missions going on the surface of the moon all at the same time because we have this reusable command and service module that our astronauts will have access to over and over again. And they will have access to the surface of the moon. I don't know if you saw, but yesterday the budget request came out. The president has granted us $1.6 billion additional dollars that didn't come from the Science Mission Directorate. It didn't come from the International Space Station. $1.6 billion additional dollars for our acceleration of the lunar program so that we can get the next man and the first woman to the surface of the moon in the year 2024. And know this, the reason that's important when we accelerate the lunar program, we are by definition accelerating the Humans to Mars program. That's what we're doing. So we're accelerating this. We need the reusable command and service module. We need that Gateway in orbit around the moon to prove how valuable it is to have more access to more parts of the moon and be able to control more missions on the surface of the moon than ever before. And again, as a proving ground. Because eventually when we go to Mars, we are going to need a permanent, reusable, I shouldn't even say reusable, it's just going to be there, command and service module in orbit around Mars. This is the way that we learn so that we can eventually go to Mars. When we talk about this reusable command and service module, for 2024 it is going to be focused exclusively on getting humans to the surface of the moon. What does that mean? That means we're going to launch a power and propulsion element, and we're going to launch what we call a utilization module. Think of it as a very small habitat that Orion can dock to and ultimately enable our astronauts to transfer. In 2024, the next man and the first woman transfer from the Orion crew capsule into the landing system that will have been aggregated at the Gateway so that landing system can get to the surface of the moon. Now that landing system includes a transfer vehicle to get to low lunar orbit. It includes a descent module in order to land and an ascent module to get back to the Gateway. Now, I understand there are differences between the moon and Mars, and how we do entry, descent, and landing there's a significant difference there. But when we talk about the Gateway, and when we talk about the ascent module, the ascent module, what we're talking about is capability that can be replicated at Mars. What we are trying to do is create as much of the architecture as possible so that it can be replicated for our eventual human mission to Mars. So again, we are accelerating the path to get to the moon. We want to be there, no kidding, by 2024. That accelerates our eventual Mars missions as well. But the first step is getting to the moon. We have to learn how to live and work on another world for long periods of time. We need to learn and understand the physiology. How do the challenges to physiology in a microgravity environment, how do those effects, after being maybe in a microgravity environment for a period of 6 months and then going into a gravity environment that is 1/6 that of the Earth, how does that affect the human condition? And we need to prove these things out on a world that is a 3-day journey home. So if something doesn't go as we're anticipating, we can get everybody home safely. That's the goal. I know I've got a half an hour here. I've already eaten up 15 minutes. And I know there's people that have questions and want to ask questions. So I'm going to open it up at this time for anybody who has thoughts, concerns, questions. And if you want to yell at me, I'm here for that too. Just know, before you yell at me, we're going to the moon so we can go to Mars.
Good morning. My name is Mike Hilton.
I got a question right here at the microphone. Go ahead, sir.
Do you envision having a Mars gateway, maybe even identical to what the lunar gateway would be?
So the idea behind Gateway is that it is that command and service module that will be in orbit around the moon permanently. It is also going to be a necessary piece of the architecture for an eventual mission to Mars. Is it going to be an exact replica? Probably not. We're going to learn along the way. The other thing that's important about Gateway is the initial pieces are all about getting to the surface of the moon. That's the important thing. But it's also going to have opportunities for expansion because a lot of our international partners want to participate in Gateway. So when we talk about additional habitation module, additional scientific capabilities, the Gateway is important for that. Speaking on that for just 1 second, I would like to say when we talk about the NASA budget, and I think this is an important point, and as you go and talk to folks, because I know this is a very activist group, as you talk to folks, let them know that the big parts of the NASA budget, we're talking about human exploration and operations, and the Science Mission Directorate are working hand in hand in getting all the understanding we need to live and work on the moon so that we can eventually take that to Mars. But it's not just the Science Mission Directorate. In the Science Mission Directorate, we're actually taking a program. One of my first initiatives was the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, where we're going to be taking small payloads to the surface of the moon for scientific purposes commercially. In other words, NASA's not going to purchase, own, and operate the hardware that takes this equipment to the moon. We're just going to buy the surface. Can you get our equipment to the moon? And if the answer is yes, we're going to buy it as a service. So that's an important thing, but know this. The Science Mission Directorate is working hand in glove with the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate so we can maximize the science of the moon, number one. But the other thing is this. When we send humans to deep space, whether it's the moon or Mars, we have to understand a lot more about solar flares and corona mass ejections. These are things that we need to understand more because if we don't, we're putting our astronauts' lives at risk. So part of the Science Mission Directorate, of course, includes heliophysics. We've got the Parker Solar Probe right now. We are using every element of NASA's capabilities to learn as much as we can so when we send our humans to Mars, they will be safe. And Gateway, of course, is a part of that. Clive.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jim. It's good to see a new NASA that is Moon and Mars.
Yes, sir.
I'm really enjoying that.
Great to hear it.
The thing you talked about, learning to live and work off planet.
Yes.
On the surface of the moon, I've heard a lot about Gateway, but what about the surface infrastructure that will be sort of destination agnostic that could then go to Mars so that we can live and work on the surface of the moon and Mars?
It's a wonderful question. And so, again, going back to the idea that this is an all-of-NASA approach. The Space Technology Mission Directorate is another mission directorate of NASA that is focused on all kinds of technologies for space exploration, and a big part of their portfolio now is focused on what do we need on the surface of the moon to live and work for a period of time. So we're going to need power. But also, if we're trying to understand how we're going to live and work, we need to understand how do we utilize the resources, in situ resource utilization. So can we use the surface of the moon to create oxygen? Can we use the water ice to create hydrogen? Can we store it for long periods of time? Can we use that capability for power and or take it off the moon for propulsion? So these are all things that right now NASA is focused on through the Space Technology Mission Directorate. And if we can master these things on the moon, I should say, when we master these things on the moon, we will be ready, willing, and able to take them to Mars.
Right, and prospecting, I think, is going to be good. So.
Absolutely. We're all in.
Thank you.
You bet. Jeff.
Morning. Jeff Faust of Space News. Is the $1.6 billion that you've requested for 2020 the minimum that you need in order to achieve a 2024 landing? That is, if you got $1 billion or $1.2 billion instead in 2020, could you still pull it off? And then a sort of related question, if, as is likely, we'll start the 2020 fiscal year on a continuing resolution that could potentially last for months, how is NASA going to work around that, since that will limit your ability to start new programs and transfer money?
It's a wonderful question. So what we did is we told the administration came to us and said, what does it take to get to the moon in 2024, and what do you need in the year 2020? Tell us what you believe you need in 2020. And so we went through an entire process, and what it comes down to is a few key things that we need to get started right away. Number one, we have to have the Space Launch System. That is an absolute critical capability to get humans to the moon in 2024. It's the only rocket capable of carrying humans to the moon by 2024. So we have to have Space Launch System. We have to have additional money for that because there has been an overrun. Number two, we have to have a landing system. So how do we get from Gateway, which we already have been funded for, how do we get from Gateway down to the surface of the moon? We need the transfer module, we need a lander, and we need an ascent module. I will also tell you that the way we are procuring that is going to be commercial in nature. When I say commercial, what I mean is we're going to buy a service. NASA is not going to purchase, own, and operate the hardware. We are, in fact, buying a service. So we're going to get proposals from industry that may or may not include a transfer module. They might be able to do it with just two elements, a descent and an ascent. We don't know, but we're going to find out. This was our best assessment as to what it would take. Now, if they come in, if Congress comes in with a lower number, the probability of success goes down and the risk goes up. Can we do it? I don't know. We'll have to look at that when it happens. But I will tell you, we are, I think, at the low end of what we believe it takes to accomplish this. The important thing is this, we got what we requested. We got what we requested in order to achieve 2024. It is also true that this is year one. And year one, if you look at any kind of development project in the history of NASA, it follows a traditional bell curve. So the first year, of course, is less than the second year, and it's less than the third year, and then it starts coming down again. So at the end of the day, this is year one. We have now come out of the gate with a strong proposal, and the administration did not take it from the Science Mission Directorate, and they didn't take it from the International Space Station, which has been what caused these programs in the past to fail. So we are, I think, in a really good position. Did I answer your question?
And the CR? If there's
the CR. So that goes well above my pay grade. It used to be in my pay grade in the old job, but now I can say it's above my pay grade. But know this, there are opportunities, even in a CR, to make sure NASA needs what it needs in order to achieve the end state, which is the next man and the first woman on the surface of the moon in 2024. There are capabilities, even in a CR, for that money to materialize. And I would encourage members of Congress in a bipartisan way to think about that when they go forward. I will also say, and I've said this before, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and I want her to be able to see herself in the same way that our current very diverse astronaut corps sees itself. And if we look at the history of moon landings, it was test pilots from the 1960s and 1970s, fighter pilots, and there were no opportunities for women back then. This program is going to enable a new generation of young girls like my daughter to see themselves in a way that maybe they wouldn't otherwise see themselves. We'll go over here and then here.
Yes, Jim.
I had a 4.5-year career in the United States Navy. You had a most distinguished career as a naval aviator up to Top Gun school. Did you ever contemplate transitioning to be an astronaut?
The question was, did I ever contemplate transitioning to be an astronaut? Maybe for about 5 seconds. But you look at the folks that get picked up for the astronaut corps. They usually have 3 PhDs, plus their Navy pilots, plus their Navy SEALs and everything else. I will tell you, I am far more suited to deal with the political environment, which this is a very difficult political environment, than I would be to be the astronaut. But I will tell you, our astronaut corps is amazing, and they are the cream of the crop of the American public, and I am extremely proud of them, as I know you are as well. Am I getting the hook? Maybe one more question? The gentleman here was very patient.
Hi. There have been a number of articles in the news that say that because of the tremendous costs of going to Mars, that we consider sharing the responsibilities with other countries. Has NASA given any consideration to doing a joint mission, or is this an all or nothing thing for the U.S.?
No, this is absolutely an international effort. So when we think about Space Policy Directive 1, the president says go to the moon sustainably. And he says go with commercial partners and international partners. And of course, utilize the resources of the moon for the purpose of eventually taking humans to Mars. That's all in Space Policy Directive 1. Now, as far as the international partnership goes, right now the International Space Station, while it's an amazing technological achievement, it's an amazing diplomatic achievement. We're talking about 15 nations operating the International Space Station. We've had 103 different countries have operations on the, science experiments on the International Space Station. We've had astronauts from dozens of countries on the International Space Station. It's an amazing marvel of diplomatic achievement. I would say we need to learn from that achievement and apply all of that to the moon and then onto Mars. So when we think about what the coalition of the future looks like, the question is, what are all the countries that are currently participating, and how do we encourage them to join us? We're increasing our budgets, and it's been bipartisan. The president has been really good with his budget requests, and of course, Congress has plussed us up every bit as much as he's requested, and in fact, more. So how do we encourage our international partners to come along with that same level of enthusiasm? We've got bipartisan support in the United States. We're heading that direction in a very strong way. How do we encourage our international partners to increase their participation so they can join us on the moon? And then even beyond our current international partners, how do we grow the partnership? You look at the countries that are going to the moon today. India has a program to go to the moon. Israel has a program to go to the moon. And of course, Japan, Canada, European Space Agency, Russia, China. It seems like everybody in the world right now has a mission to go to the moon. So how do we take advantage of all these capabilities and ultimately put together a coalition that can go not just to the moon, but ultimately to Mars? So I just want to say thank you. Artemis, I love the name.
I know. and actually, if someone does that to you, gives your name to a big NASA program, I think, a thank you.
All right.
Is in order. And
awesome.
as I always say, this is a lens cloth of a Van Gogh painting. May it keep your vision of Mars clear.
Thank you. We will indeed. Thank you so much, Artemis.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful conference, and we'll see you next year, if not before. Talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Give me a hug.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very well done.
All right.